Hey, what's up? My name's JM Chaley and welcome to my channel. This week I want to talk about Medusa, the Gorgon. Often maligned, always shown as this hideous monster that just needs to be killed and beheaded. I was inspired to do this video because I recently watched the new Percy Jackson series, which isn't half bad, but it reminded me of the part of the book where Percy ran into Medusa and killed her, cut her head off. And I remember thinking the first time I encountered that part of the story, shouldn't she have already been killed by Perseus? I mean, I understand that Percy is named Perseus and that he's supposed to be, but he's not Percy, he's not the Perseus, right? He's not the son of Zeus as Perseus was. He's the son of a completely different guy. The actual Medusa should have been killed thousands and thousands of years ago. Right? During the time of, Perseus. So it always felt like, oh, here we go again. Throwing in Medusa as the de facto nasty, hideous monster that needs to be beheaded, for some greater cause. And it took me back to Ovid's story of Medusa, and I think that's the version of the story that most people know. There are many versions of her story. As you know, a lot of Greek mythology will conflict with each other. The stories conflict with one another. I did a video on Greek mythology. I'll put it up here. One of the things I go into is how the different authors of Greek mythology sometimes contradict one another. But Ovid was a Roman. He was born around 40 BC and he died around 18 AD. So he lived about 500 years after Pindar, who was considered one of the forerunners or authors of Greek mythology. Ovid was not a believer in these tales, unlike Pindar and the early, Homer and all these other people that wrote the original myths. Ovid was not a believer. He believed all this stuff was bullshit. He was a Roman, and he made a lot of money selling his stories, which he knew were made up, to a bunch of people that he considered dummies, right? And even Edith Hamilton, who is probably one of the greatest contemporary scholars of Greek mythology, considered him and his writing to be lacking. When you compare him to all the other writers that are out there, Ovid falls short. But it was his story that had the whole bullshit idea that Medusa, fleeing the advances of Poseidon, the unwanted advances of Poseidon, I'll just leave it at that, fled into Athena's temple. Of course, Ovid's calling her Minerva, but it's Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war. And Athena gets mad at Medusa, blames her. How dare you run into my temple to, I can't even rationalize why Athena would be mad, but whatever, How dare you run into my temple, half-dressed, and curses Medusa to become this hideous, snake-haired creature. With the gaze of stone and all this kind of stuff. Now, Ovid didn't create the whole idea of gaze to stone and snake heads and all that kind of stuff. He just created that crazy backstory, which is just nuts to me. Medusa is, if you go back further, again, 500 years before Ovid put his bullshit into the world, with Pindar, Medusa was one of three sisters, the Gorgons. And often, if you look at old carvings of the Gorgons, they look monstrous. They really do. Although Pindar referred to Medusa as being quite comely. He called her fair-cheeked, which I assume means pretty. So she may have been like the prettiest of the sisters. And in terms of the three Gorgons, she was, for whatever reason, the only one that was mortal of the three. But he wasn't the only, Pindar wasn't the only one that wrote her as being beautiful. Polygnotus, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering that name, Polygnotus, also wrote her about as being an attractive, beautiful woman. Even though she had the hair of snakes, and she could gaze at you and turn you to stone, all that stuff, sure, she's still a Gorgon. He described her as beautiful. In fact, in his version of the story, she was asleep when Perseus crept into her chamber and cut off her head. There wasn't even a fight. He just murdered her, basically. This statue here is, to me, is heartbreaking because it just really shows that, you know, she's a victim here, right? She's not the monster that needed to be killed. Even in Pindar's story, the motivations of Perseus were to save his mother, who was being forced to marry this king, who was a horrible tyrant. And Perseus lacked the resources or strength or whatever to take this king on, which is a little silly to me, but then again, it's almost like if you watch the screen pitch, like, so the movie can happen, you know. Perseus ends up getting outfitted with all these gifts from the gods. He gets these winged shoes from Hermes. He gets a sword from Hephaestus, and he gets the shield from Athena with the mirror on it. And off Perseus goes to slay Medusa, to get her head, right? And again, we don't really hear anything about why Medusa needs to be killed, right? She's a Gorgon. Yeah, they're depicted as monstrous, but I couldn't find any real tales of. They might be out there. I haven't found any in my travels about the terrible things the Gorgons have done. He was really just using her head as a weapon. What kills me is that, armed with all this stuff, Perseus couldn't have just killed the king directly. He needed the head, but whatever. So he kills the head. He takes her head, brings it back, shows the head to the king, turns the king to stone. I don't know how he got away with that, right? Doesn't the king have guards or an army? Or I don't know. But his mother's now free, and off they go. Now, there's different variations of that story too, right? One of the versions is that after he kills Medusa, she gives birth to the Pegasus. And he climbs on the Pegasus' back, and he's flying around. And Atlas, who has the weight of the world on his shoulders, gets annoyed with him and tries to attack him. I don't even know what that looks like, but he's holding up the globe, and he's like, hey, you know. And he shows the head to Atlas, and he turns to stone. There's another version where he's not rescuing his mother. He's rescuing Andromeda, who's a princess, and he wants to marry her, right? So he starts turning people to stone around her, and that's kind of the plot of Clash of the Titans. There's even another variation of that where he wasn't even looking to find Andromeda. He just happened upon her. He's off to save his mother, and he happened upon this princess, and he's like, that girl needs some help. Hey, turn everyone to stone. Okay, let's go save my mom. Lots and lots of conflict, but no matter which way you slice it, whoever's getting turned to stone, Medusa always ends up being this poor woman who gets her head cut off, and I have yet to see anything that she's done to deserve it. So when we talk about Medusa, we have to talk about Clash of the Titans. And I mean the original movie from, 1980, 81, right? With Harry Hamlin, right? And Ray Harryhausen, who did all the stop motion. Now, Ray Harryhausen was the guy that put the snake tail on Medusa. She'd never been depicted before with the snake tail, I don't think. The ancient Greeks depicted her with legs and feet, right? She had the snake head, sure, but she didn't have the big snake body. That was an invention by Ray Harryhausen. It looked cool, but it also made her more monstrous, which I think they were shooting for. And he happened upon, in the Clash of the Titans movie, he happened upon the Pegasus in the meadow. So instead of Medusa giving birth to it, he happened upon it and tamed it and rode it. And of course, he turns the Kraken to stone and saves Andromeda. The other thing that happened in the Clash of the Titans movie is that his mother, Danae, died. Right? She's in the coffin and she's dead when they find her. She didn't, in most Greek stories, she didn't die. She lived, which I thought was a waste of not just writing her out of that story, because she was kind of a big part of his life in most versions of the story. So as much as I love the Clash of the Titans movie, it's a classic. It did a lot to damage the perception of Medusa in popular culture and reinforced that kind of Ovid view of her as this monster that just needs to be killed. But I'm liking what I'm seeing lately. There's been some retellings of Medusa's story. This stuff is out there. She's become sort of a feminist icon. The idea of, the female gaze, right? The man that is putting himself, toxic masculinity, whatever you want to call it, right? The idea that a woman could just go, and you turn to stone, right? Which I think is kind of cool. It's a nice redemption arc for her. Not that she needed to be redeemed, but the character is now being moved into this new light where she's seen heroically. And I love that for the character of Medusa, to be a hero, right? I'd love to write a story where she's a hero. I'm inspired to do it. I don't know what that story would be, but let me at it. So I think she's just this often maligned character in Greek mythology. I think she deserves better. Ovid really did her wrong. Oh my God, punishing the victim, that just sucks, So, yeah, and I don't know why she needed to be recycled for Percy Jackson when she probably should have already been dead. Lots of other monsters to take on. I don't know why we needed to cut her head off again. But, yeah, Medusa. I'm a fan. I'm a fan in any way that she can come and be depicted in a positive way. I'm all for it. I'm here for it. All right, so that about wraps it up. Medusa. Misunderstood, in my opinion. Fantastic character. So many contradictions to her story. You almost have to pick your favorite and choose. Hopefully it won't be the Ovid version. Ugh, right? If you like this video, please give it a like. And as always, please subscribe. I post most Thursdays. And you can follow me on a plethora of social media platforms. I'm very active on Facebook and Blue Sky. And be sure to check out The Unlife of Lisa Cooper if you like strong heroines. I think you do. Lisa Cooper may be a vampire, but she is someone who has stuck true to her convictions for over 160 years, maintaining the remnants of the woman she was in life. And she's using it to stay on top of her curse. But in doing so, she has sacrificed power that is usually accompanied a vampire her age. And when the forces of the darkness come and threaten her and the people she cares about, will she have enough power to protect those she loves? All right. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.